Welcome to the Have a Goddess podcast with spiritual detective Dr. Joanna Kujawa and its motto, if you want to be spiritual, ask difficult questions. In this podcast, we discuss Mary Magdalene, the archetypes of the Have a Goddess, new forms of consciousness that inspire, as well as the interconnection between sexuality and spirituality. You can join the conversation by signing to the Have a Goddess podcast, my YouTube channel, Dr. Joanna Kujawa, and even better through my book, The Have a Goddess, Mary Magdalene, and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge, published by Sacred Stories. And today I am so totally delighted to have a wonderful guest who is a great Tantric master, very prolific author, and especially I am a great fan of his two books especially, but he's a very prolific author. Because I believe that he's one of the very few Tantric teachers who truly honored the goddess principle. So welcome, Daniel Odier. It's a pleasure
Thank
to
you. Thank you very much. I like the title Spiritual Detective. It's rather funny.
I know. So it's a spiritual detective, and it's real, but it's not so serious. You know, some people take it too
Yes, I got it.
too seriously. So I hope it's a beautiful morning, October morning in Paris.
Yes, wonderful.
Oh, fantastic. And
Fun.
do you still have a center in Paris, or?
No, since many years it's closed. I go to different places, but I don't have a center by my own.
That's right, because this is when I was doing research on you, preparing for this interview. I was checking, and they said that, you chose to close your center.
Yes.
So I will start with, first of all, maybe I will share how I acquainted myself with this book, Tantric Quest by Inner Traditions, published by Inner Traditions, obviously by you, Daniel Odier. So as I mentioned in my own book, I was meeting for a study of the Kula ritual, which was being translated by John Dupuche. I'm not sure if you're aware of him. He's an Australian scholar of French, actually, background, John Dupuche, who translated Abhinavagupta's Kula ritual, chapter 29. And I was the only woman there, and there was one Tibetan monk, there was a Swami from Adelaide, and there was a yoga teacher and me. And this yoga teacher, as we were studying Kula ritual, recent translation from Sanskrit, it was a while ago, it was in 2003, I think, the yoga teacher brought this book, and he says, "Do you know this book by Daniel Odier?" And I said, "No," but I immediately bought it. So, and I loved it because, you have a different approach towards Tantra and towards the goddess. Would you like to say something about that, about this book, or?
Yes. The Kashmirian Tantric tradition is coming from the Indus Valley, like 5,000-6,000 years ago. And it's a matriarchal culture. And the fantastic thing is that it stayed like this until today, because most of the matriarchal culture just disappeared over the time. But the Tantric tradition was kept by the yogini, who have a very, very strong impact, a very fascinating and direct way to transmit the teaching. And this is why I look for it myself, going to the Kashmir. And when I was 30, and finally I met Lalita Devi, a great yogini from Kashmir. But her way of teaching was very abrupt, very intense, full of love, and full of a kind of what we would call violence, but it was not violence. It was just to destroy all the fake human being in front of her.
And this is what every good spiritual teacher does to us, right? He shows us all our nonsense, right? All our BS, right? And we have to deal with this because it's just in front of us. That was
Yes.
that was my experience with my spiritual teacher as well. So I just, because you actually answered my first question, which was, did you look for the teachings, goddess related teachings in Tantra before you met Lalita, before you met Devi? But you said you already were looking for it, and that's why you've met her, right?
Yes, but before I was for 7 years with Kalu Rinpoche, a great Tibetan master, and what was interesting is part of the Shangpa lineage, which is the only Tibetan lineage related to two yogini, Niguba and Sukhasiddhi. All the other school are male directed. But Kalu, the start of this school, which is not very famous in Tibet, is from two yoginis. So I already was in the good track in a way.
So you were already in a good track, on the right track. So this is very interesting because I will tell you with my experience, although I studied, with different teachers of Kashmir Shaivism, I actually didn't think that they related much to women or the goddess principle. And I really didn't, although they spoke very vaguely about Shakti, you were the first one that actually truly honored it and spoke about this lineage. Because I will tell you a little story. I was, two little stories, how it actually upset me because I was with one prominent teacher of Kashmir Shaivism, and for our listeners, this is a form of esoteric Hinduism. And I asked him, he was teaching, he lives now in Varanasi, but he's a British scholar. So I don't want to give his name, but he's a wonderful man, and I have learned a lot from him. And I asked him, because people ask him different questions, and I asked him, what about, were any women disciples, around Abhinava Gupta? He was talking about Abhinava Gupta, which is, just again for our listeners, 10th century great philosopher and tantric from Kashmir in India. And he said very naturally, without intending any malice, he says, oh no, maybe they were in some kind of devotional way, maybe they were cooking for him, or he immediately went into this kind of very patriarchal way of talking about it. And I just internally knew that he was wrong. And I seldom have Kali moments, but at that moment, although I adored him as a scholar, I wish I could bite his head off like Goddess Kali. And not that I had any evidence for this, but I knew that what was there, it was just his own judgment about
Yes.
yeah?
Because there are many evidence that there were a lot of remarkable women and yogini around Abhinava Gupta. There are a lot of evidence too in his writing that it doesn't make any difference between a woman and a man. For him, they are just human beings, Mm-hmm. And we say that yoga is balancing the male and the female energy in everyone. So for us, the principal idea is that if you are deeply inside the yoga, it's not important if you are a woman or if you are a man, but the yoga will just balance the two energy and make you complete, full. So there are many testimony, especially from the adversary of Abhinava Gupta, the Brahmin, who were writing that he was surrounded by a lot of remarkable women. So they were not there for cooking. They were poets, they were musicians, they were dancers, they were mathematicians. Abhinava Gupta was surrounded with genius because the tantric path was so open to the woman that all the women from Asia, from China, from everywhere. They would just come to Kashmir because it was the only place where they could be recognized as a master and teach. And Lalita, for example, was a clear example that she was a woman and she was a great yogini, and she was appointed by her master to be a master. So,
A part
but
of the lineage, yeah.
yes, but most academic people they are reassured to think that women are just there for cleaning their clothes,
But that's right. So that's why, although I really adored this particular scholar, because he's a very learned man and so on, and like every great, and he's part of a lineage as well, as you are, of Abhinavagupta as well. And I feel very connected to this lineage as well. And I was disappointed. And as I said, I didn't also kind of internally I knew that it cannot be true, because I'm not here to fight for women's rights. I just want to say that exactly as you said, it is just two different principles, feminine and masculine, and they have to engage with each other and they have to play each other, but as equals, right? Otherwise I think there's something wrong.
And you know what is absurd? I just finished my new book about the Kola tradition and Mathyendranath et Konkanamba. So this is an interesting example because they came in Kashmir in the 8th century, 4 generations before Abhinavagupta, and they were a couple of Mahasiddha teaching together, a woman and a man. And if you read the Kolajnana Nirnaya Tantra, which I have in my book and I comment with all the practice, it's all about the Shakti power, the whole Tantra. There is nothing in this Tantra that the Shakti power and how it works and with all the practice. And of course, the practice were not explained in the Tantra because it was a book supposed to be read by a practitioner. So they were supposed to know the practice. So, for example, Mathyendranath would just say, do the practice of the red goddess, and that's all. And if you don't know the practice of the red goddess, you are totally lost. So what I did since 3 years is to replace all the practice I received from Lalita in the Tantra of Mathyendranath. So it will be the first time that the Kaula practice are very clearly explained. And it's all about female and yogini.
Fantastic. So I'm really looking forward actually to this book because, for example, when I studied Kula Ritual with John Dupush, this is this book, he translated chapter 29 of Abhinavagupta. I'm sorry,
yes.
Yes. So which is the most, as it says in the introduction, the most scandalous because it talks about the sexual practices. However, as we are reading this, and there are some beautiful passages, that you have to honor a woman as a Shakti and the man, the hero, as a Shiva, so it's very equal, right? And it's very, and eros or sexuality, is used for spiritual purposes, but in the most beautiful way. And there is a worship, also a prayer that man does to the woman and vice versa, a woman to the man, and so on. So it's very beautiful. However, as we are reading from this text, it felt so coded, there were some poetic moments, but apart from this, I thought I would not know how to do this ritual because exactly as you say, right? It is just do this ritual, or I say the mantra to somebody, but it doesn't actually give you the mantra, or it doesn't give you instructions, just as you said. So I'm glad that you're going to have a book that actually explains what they mean by that.
Yes, because the sexual ritual is. It requires so many things at the same time that it's nearly a dream. and it's nearly impossible unless it's done in a very direct way, as Lalita did it with me. But to do the ritual, it's something nearly impossible for a Westerner or even for an Indian. And because for Abhinavagupta, the sexuality was really important, but it was coming at the end of the sadhana. Means you have to meditate for maybe 10 or 15 years and do all the practice. And maybe then, if you are able to enter in samadhi like this,
yes,
you will get the ritual, but it was not even sure. So it was just for very few disciples who were very, very strong in the yoga practice. It was not for everybody,
it's not
as
for
many
everybody.
people think.
Yes. So okay. So would you like to describe for our viewers, the ritual, the build up to the ritual with Lalita, for you?
So the ritual could be rather simple, ending with an explosion of the Kundalini, or it could be very ritual. The very ritual part we already talked about is nearly impossible to think about. The direct path, as I received from Lalita, came after a very long time of training, of destruction of the fake or the manipulative human being. And it was such an intense training, like 20 hours a day. You could hardly sleep. You never knew when you will start again. It could be 2 in the morning, it could be 3, it could be 4. Then maybe she would go on for 18 hours, nearly without stop. The intensity was such that I think very few people can hold it. Even for me, it was like every 3 nights I was dreaming that I was going away or that I was killing her because she was like too much,
Yes, yes.
And so then the basic thing is that you are able to enter into samadhi in 1 second, like bam. And then when you can do this, when both can do this, because this is the problem, it's not only the master, but the student has to be on the level of equality. I mean, in the essence, we have the same essence. Then it can take place. But so many things, the total presence, the breathing, the slowliness, the intensity, the absence of distraction for hours, to be totally present, to that your body feels totally the body of the other person. Then the mantras, then the planet. You are connected with all the planet. Then the nyasa, the touching. With the nyasa, your master is putting all the secret places of India, the 50 sacred places, inside your body. So you have to know the 50 points. You have to know each mantra that put the sacred place in the right point. And then you are one with the cosmos. So it's a slow process, very intense, where you can not miss a step. It's not enough to call the other Shiva or Shakti, put some flowers and fuck.
But that's true. This is sometimes a problem with what they call it modern tantra or neo tantra, when people want to use it just for sexual means. However, there are lots of people when I did studies, and I think like it also happened to me, they have a spontaneous experience of that. So, for example, they have I went through a formal initiation, which was, by torch, Shaktipat, just torch on the forehead. When I had the experience of Kundalini movement and felt myself being out of space and time, what you described right at the moment. And once I had also Kundalini movement, which was really beautiful, and also the man felt it, which happened spontaneously right after I came back from the study of Abhinavagupta. So I didn't do any rituals. I was just, studying the rituals very intensely with a group of people, and then this experience happened to me. So it was completely spontaneous and something that I would never be able to repeat.
Yes.
It just happened, but spontaneously. It's almost like in Christian terminology, it was almost like a grace, but very obviously very sensual grace, but very beautiful movement and very rapid movement of Kundalini energy, which actually moved, eventually to my forehead. And then it was a very conscious energy. It wasn't just something sexual, but it was a very conscious, completely different energy. And at certain point, it's almost like I was making decision, and then it moved in this direction and moved through my head. But it was a long time ago, and and then I knew that it's real. Do you know what I mean? It was like I knew that it's completely real, and it was
Yes.
and then I also knew that it's completely not up to me, that I don't have a ritual, I cannot repeat it. It was almost like a gift, that happened. I don't know why it happened, but it was a gift
Yes.
of the goddess.
Sometimes life is giving us these moments even to people who never meditate for 1 hour. So, but the idea, of course, of the ritual is to make it totally part of your life.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes,
and
yes. No, I
it's never
absolutely agree.
reproduced anyway because it's always new. So you never make twice the same experience. It's always something new.
That's right, and that leads me to another. Before I will move in this direction, I also want to ask you something, because I think that one thing that scholars very often, academics, I shouldn't say scholars, make one mistake is they always say, "Oh, Tantra started around 10th century." And there was Abhinavagupta, then was Shemaraja, and there's this line of scholars, and they completely, and when you go much earlier, when you go back to the matriarchal tradition, right? Because do you think it was the oral tradition? That's why? And that's why the academics are just looking at the written tradition, because they say Tantra didn't start until basically Abhinavagupta.
No, it starts much earlier. The problem is that even today we don't know the writing of the Indus Valley. We have the writings, but nobody know what is written on the plates. And of course, it was oral transmission. So there is a gap like between the end of Indus culture. There is a large gap where the yoginis started to continue to the transmission. And as they were not living in the city, but in the mountains, whatever happened to the civilization of the Indus, which was destroyed or disappear, we don't know exactly how, it didn't touch the tradition because they were already out of the cities. And then from yogini to yogini, it was transmitted to Kashmir, and it started to re-emerge, I think, in the 1st century. So like 9th century before Abhinavagupta, And this tradition, they are so strong that they will never die, they were there millenniums ago, they were there at the time of Abhinavagupta, they are still there today. It's so powerful, it cannot disappear unless everything disappears.
So why do you think this tradition is disregarded? Because it's very difficult to, apart from your work, to find some legitimate, reference to this. Everybody. Why is it kind of disregarded? This is what I mean. The matriarchal tradition of the yoginis.
Because, many academics are males, and they need to evolve in something that is sure. They don't like mysteries too much. So when they have suddenly a gap of hundreds of years where they have no documents, nothing, they conclude that there was nothing. But of course, if it arrives in Kashmir, it arrives from somewhere. It didn't merge like a miraculous thing. Like Vasugupta finding the writings on a rock.
Shiva Sutras, yes, under the rock, yes.
These are stories for children. And, in India, you have the 64 yogini temple, you have 3 or 4 of them. And they are yogini temple, no, it's clear. Everybody know that. So if you had 64 yogini meeting once a year in this temple, it means the movement was very strong.
So Daniel, do you have any final words for us, words of wisdom, or just anything?
No, just be one with the cosmos and you will be happy.
Be one with the cosmos and you will be happy, and
Yes.
you will help the world, right? And you will help the
Yes.
world. And,
Yes.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I really cannot say on a personal level how your work really helped me. So I obviously never met you just now, but I've met you through your work, and it made a tremendous impact for me. And I'm a sincere seeker, and your work is especially spoke to me, not only because I'm a woman, but because even if I were a man, I knew that there was something missing, and you actually talk about it with great love, and you had an experience of it. And especially in the last part of your book, Tantric Quest, when you talk about how you miss Lalita, I had the same feeling, when you separated from the teacher, and then how you have to continue basically on your own, right? So I also believe how genuine this experience was for you, and I really, really appreciate, and I my gratitude has no ends that you agreed to this interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you. And if you are patient, like maybe a year, you will have the new book about the Kola tradition in Matsyamanat, and only the title would make you happy. It's called Kola, the Royal Path of the Shakti.
And with this, we end our podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, sign in to the Other Goddess podcast. You can find similar conversations on my YouTube channel, Dr. Joanna Kujawa, and consider buying my book, The Other Goddess, Mary Magdalene and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge. Until next time.